think we're live now. I know it's funny. Um,
Well, in electronic age, I think the most satisfying answer is an answer to a computer problem or electronic problem. I think we have to be careful with how much time we spend on screens because in order to do things outside of work and driving to work and sleeping and eating, we have uh, 18 hours, so that leaves us with 6 hours in a day. So we have to drive an hour. How much of the 6 hours do we spend watching TV, uh, looking at your phone, looking at your computer, video games, systems? Uh, so we need to be careful with that. Enough of me preaching. Um, I will give you a brief history of my mother, and I had not. I should give it the preparation that she deserves, but I really want to be free flowing and not make it seem like a speech. So I will say that my mother, her mother was a soft and gentle soul. Um, she had two brothers, and a very tough father, military type, abusive, mean guy who expected his sons to be exceptionally tough. And I don't know if he had much interest in his daughter. Didn't seem to be. My mother never left me with that impression. Uh, but he was exceptionally abusive to a woman who was very, very gentle. She was scared for her life enough so that she was climbing out the window, and he caught her hair and ripped a chunk of her hair out of her head. And she was afraid she was going to die. That's how bad he was beating her up. He scared my mother, but also made her angry at men like him, and she didn't much care for her brothers. She did show kindness and consideration, but she really didn't care for them as people. Um, so she was working in the middle of all that. She had got a little office job, and even then she knew she had some kind of a, what is the word? Uh, Hypoglycemic issue. So she would take a candy bar and things like that whenever she felt like her hypoglycemia was getting low. Um, but she didn't know what it was, and back then you just didn't have terms for those kind of things. But she met my dad and was impressed. My dad was trying very hard to be impressive. He had a fancy car for a guy that was pretty broke. It was an okay car. Um, he could sing pretty good, and he still does. My dad does. These are the things that I can be wrong. When I stop making mistakes, I'll be dead. I just don't make a lot of mistakes. So anyway, he impressed her enough that they decided to get married, and they did get married. In the middle of all that, my mother's father caught my dad, tried to run him off the road and pinned him so he couldn't go anywhere. And he started grabbing my dad and roughing him up, threw him up on the car, and it was slamming his head into the car. And my dad wasn't much of a fighter, even by his own words. And he smashed my dad's head into the windshield and crunched the windshield all up. My dad decided the best thing to do was act like he was dead. And so he survived that, and he got left there. Um, the judge in the divorce decided that it was best for the boys to be with the father and the daughter to be with the mother. She didn't get any child support that I'm aware of. My grandmother didn't. And so, my grandmother didn't have a car. I don't think she ever owned a car in the time that I knew her. She didn't. So my mother came from a soft and gentle soul who was doing her best to get by. And she met my dad, who was a flamboyant, singing, bouffant hair, slicked back 50s guy who was pretty charming. And they fell in love and got married. Wasn't terrible long after that. Now she moved in, Dad moved her in with his mother and his sister and brother. You can believe that was a problem. There were some issues, and I'm not aware of all of them, but it was like, bratty kids saying you don't belong here kind of thing. And eventually Dad got a small mobile home, and he moved her into it. He was going into the union school to be an electrician, and she stood by him through all the tough times. She stood by him and was a pretty decent, quiet person. And I think at that time she was getting her fill of keeping quiet, but she was building up to it. But along came me. And while she was carrying me, she got mumps. That caused a massive amount of fear in her that her child would not have any children. So for the longest time, even though we went through my health issues when I was younger, she carried a guilt with her. She didn't tell me until my children were born that she felt like she had guilt that I might not have children because she had mumps while carrying me. But of course that didn't happen. We lived in Houston, Texas. North Shore area, which is close to San Jacinto. And they say if the world was to get an enema, they would put the hose in there. It's a pretty dirty, polluted area. There was always flames being burned off from the extra fuel. It was pollution city for any number of reasons. It was very crowded. But when people are young, you have all the optimism in the world. And my dad became a good electrician. He worked hard. He worked the Budweiser plant and was doing switchgear when it was called click, clunk. And he did all that stuff, all that wiring that made those big old switches work and make that factory Anheuser-Busch or Budweiser one. I can't remember which one. I think it was Anheuser-Busch. Anyway, she stood by him, and they ended up getting a house in a subdivision. And that was along the way they picked up another child. And then they decided, after, they picked up that second child after 3 years of me, and then they decided to adopt 2 more and wanted to take on even more than that of my dad's cousins. They left behind like 6 kids, I think it was, and my dad was able to get 2 boys. Of course, they raised us all the same, didn't treat one of us different than the other. And I still think of him as my brother. We went through all the things that it took to be raised by these 2 people, and they didn't treat them. If anything, anybody got treated worse, it would be me, and I deserved it. So, according to my dad, I got more spankings than all my brothers, which was 3, and my sisters put together. So
5 kids, but you're 1.
yes, I got more spankings than all of them put together. But this little boy got rheumatic fever as a child. And it kind of meant that I was bedridden quite a bit. I just didn't feel good, and I would lay around. I had a father that wanted to do like models with me, and they were very, very conscious of.
Children's families here.
Hi, Children's family. Um, so she took on that sick child, and she was pretty firm. Um, and my dad was working a lot of hours, and so we had now 4 boys. And believe me, that must have been a load for an inexperienced woman to take on. Um, but my mother was pretty tough. We go to grocery stores and she'd say, "Everybody put your hands on the cart and don't take them off." And she'd run the cart through the middle of the aisle so we couldn't reach anything. So, and boy, you got smacked if you got even stretched out to touch something. So, I would say this: my mother wasn't free with saying that she loved me, but there was no doubt in my mind that I was cared for by my mother. I would do silly things to get her attention. Go up and climb in a tree and hook my leg into a tree and say, "Mom, Mom," and she'd come out to help me, and then she realized that I was just trying to get her attention because as soon as she come over close to me, I'd unhook my leg and drop out of there. After doing that 2 or 3 times, I actually got tired and couldn't lift myself up to lift my leg out of the fork of that tree, and I was like, "Oh my God, Mom, can I really help me? You're just kidding." "No, you're not." "Oh, hold on. You just stay right there. I'm going to go get a picture of you." So she got a picture of me hanging upside down, kind of weepy-eyed. And she was kind and wonderful to a boy who was rowdy when he was out of the bed. Um, so they moved when I was 8 from Houston, Texas, to a little town called Deere, Arkansas, which is south of Jasper, which is south of Harrison, which is south of Branson, Missouri. So near the border of Branson. Very rural in the 60s. I was born in 61. So 69, pretty tumultuous time. And here I am, a little boy that was kind of bedridden. My brothers were out running around playing and stuff like that. I remember one time I got in trouble because somebody had took jelly and rubbed it on the wall and then put flour on the jelly. But that was a lot of fun until I got a spanking for it. But there was something in me that when I decided to get out of being bedridden, that my mother was there, just let him go. Let's see what happens. And I got out of the bed and would push my bike up to the top of the hill and ride it down, coast. Push my bike up to the top of the hill and ride it down, push my bike, eventually I didn't have a problem with rheumatic fever. Later on I was told that I was to expect a hole in the heart, an enlarged heart, lots of heart problems, and probably live into my 50s, and that'd be it. That's what to expect. Of course, I was much older when I was told that. I wasn't told that as a little boy. So my dad was a union electrician, and we didn't have enough. We bought 44 acres, but eventually he sold off 40 of it. And he would do what he could to stay in the area and do work in that very sparse rural area to do work there. We had a 1-acre garden, and we'd put 1,000 pounds of potatoes up in the barn loft, and then after it dried out, we'd take it down into the root cellar. My mom did canning, learned how to can. She learned how to make biscuits, and believe me, we suffered along learning how not to make biscuits. But later on, she made wonderful meals, more and more countrified. Chocolate gravy, if you might use that. I was raised to be a worker, and my dad put 2 single-wide mobile homes together and added on to the house that we had, in between. we had all those things as a child, and Dad would take me hunting. I would work with him on cars. I didn't know what was going on. I knew how to know the fractions on the wrenches, and my dad, for whatever reason, liked Volvos, VO Volvos from Sweden. There weren't very many Volvos in that area. He had to go long and hard and long, long ways to find parts. And then he still had to deal with the fact that he had carburetors that should have had a manometer you would time them to open up and at the same time. A manometer is like a water stick that pretty much shows you where your suction is on each carburetor. Anyway, we all had to pick potato bugs and put them in the kerosene, and the cut worms, and weed the garden, being real careful to not damage the plants. I think at times we were poor enough that we qualified for commodities, they called it then.
They still call it that.
Do they? It wasn't food stamps. You went down and you could get, you go and pick out of the things that are there.
Nasty, nasty peanut butter that's only good for baking cookies.
Probably, I don't remember peanut butter. I remember ham and cheese ground up together in a block. It was in a metal can. That would last a long time. But hey, it was great, really. My mom and dad bought lots of calf liver, because it was cheaper. And got so where I don't really want to eat calf liver anymore. I will, but I don't want to.
Which I like it, so that's kind of a pain in the butt.
So my mother was doing all she could to learn how to cook things. I remember the time she yelped and carried on because the frog legs were jumping around in the pan. But my dad was very. I remember him as a hard worker. But I know that he saw fit to keep me busy by working me hard. But he was there a lot too. So my mother hugged on us, and then whenever one of us got chicken pox, she made sure all of us got it at the same time.
You don't want to go through that more than once.
Yeah, so everybody had socks on their hands so you couldn't scratch your face and all that, And,
I remember chicken pox parties.
Yeah.
Where the whole neighborhood would get together and
Let's get it over
all
with.
the
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
So you got to understand, as a child, an only child even, my mother had a lot of problems with me. Like one time she talks about a story of a little bitty, like 2-year-old. She had the window rolled down enough so she'd go into the gas station, pay for the gas. And it wasn't convenience stores, it was just a gas station. So you're not in there to buy sodas and things like that. So she walked to the gas station. By the time she come out, I had climbed out of the window and was toddling across a 5-lane road, turning lane and everything. I was in there. Cars were going, "Gah." She was like, "Oh my God, I could have lost my only."
We didn't have children. That child would have been demon spawn from hell.
Well, it could be. But she, I remember one time I probably was 5, and I usually sat in the front seat with her, and she's like, "I noticed that you were sitting in the back seat." And we had been to a store, gas station, and she had pumped the gas, and I was in the back seat, squatted down behind her so she couldn't see me. So she pulled over to look behind, and there I was opening up a packet of Wrigley gum, trying to get to the gum. "Where did you get that? I didn't buy that for you. Did you steal that?" I was like shocked, Here I am, sickly little child, but I was already, I want that, I'll grab it, So she drove all the way back, which is 10 minutes probably. And the guy said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't you say that to my son. I don't want him growing up to be a thief." And she just embarrassed me till I was crying. You tell him that he did wrong, and I won't have anything But that, you tell him right now. And she browbeat the guy into telling me, don't do that, son. You shouldn't be doing that. And the guy, so embarrassed, But I never stole another thing in my life.
I was gonna say.
Um, she did a lot of things that made me who I was.
Don't forget telling him about your mama getting life insurance on you.
Yeah, that would be later. Now you got to understand, as I got older now, my dad went to a lot of places without the family, and would go away for 6 weeks and then come back. Yet that woman was taking care of 4 little boys in a very rural area with very little money, in a ramshackle place. Even
you guys
for back.
were all ranging in you were really close in age, weren't you?
I had a brother that was 3 years younger and a brother that was young. Here's one of the funny things. I remember one time we went to the Houston Zoo, which was a big zoo, and people they were pushing my 2 brothers, the 2 youngest brothers, one adopted, one not, and they would push them in a twin deal. It was one seat beside the other, and everybody go, "Oh my God, they're twins! How old are you?" And it would be like, this one is this age, and this one is 6 weeks older, and everybody like, "What? You took 6 weeks to have the second one?" They took a lot of amusement in doing that. Of course, every brother had a different personality, every one of them, and she dealt with all of it. And we usually had somebody else's child. I don't remember a summer where somebody, hey, we're trying to hold our marriage together. Can you watch Matthew? And he would stay with us the whole summer, or Bart, or, there was always somebody staying with us. And, I look back at it now, and it was my parents saying, yeah, we hardly would notice one more.
Yeah. We've already got 4. What's 5?
Yeah, 5 is not a big deal. We just, put a little more potatoes in the food.
Yeah.
So I remember, of course, I got lots of spankings, of course. But I went to a lot of different schools. Now I'm feeling healthy and rowdy, and there's just no keeping my energy down.
There still isn't.
So she was having to tame me a lot. She was not controlling, but she certainly kept an eye on the little kid that went across the street and would hang himself from the... I remember I had a pedal car, and it was take me all my energy to push the pedal car up the uphill driveway to the garage.
That was while you were still sick, wasn't it?
Yes. And it was a little Surrey. It had a seat in the front and seat in the middle, and you pedaled. Anyway, it had a little canvas top. So I got the neat idea that whenever a car would come cruising through the neighborhood, I would run my Surrey right down in front of them.
Oh my God.
I did it several times before my mom caught on. But it was so hard for me to push that cart up that hill, being out of breath and everything. So she caught me. Boy, I didn't get to pedal the car in the neighborhood without her anymore. So I wasn't allowed in the front yard. There was no fence. So nope, you're in the backyard only. I could probably go back and forth. I remember trying to mess with crabs when she wasn't paying close attention to me. So in big crowds, she would put containing things on me, sort of have a leash, because I was like, oh. My brothers were the same way, but they were a little more disciplined, quite a bit more. So mom and dad, they did a really, really good job. I mean, all my brothers and sisters were very well behaved in school. I mean, we weren't really rowdy. We were not a problem. Probably not noticed hardly. So they did all that, and of course, they were not wealthy. Of course. How can you have 4 kids, most of the time raising somebody else's? How do you get wealthy with that? I mean, this can be done, but it's not very good odds, and they weren't trying to be. So we would find toys in the back of station wagons and cars and junkyards. We'd be looking in the back, or we go to the dump and dump stuff, and then we'd see broken toys. It was the biggest adventure ever. But we didn't get to go to those dumps very often. And there were no garage sales. Probably the closest thing to garage sales were an occasional auction where you might buy a box of who knows what in there, and it would be like this big adventure to open up cans of miscellaneous stuff. So I broke multiple fingers before I was 12. My dad borrowed a backhoe and made a flat area for me to have a very sort of flat area with lots of rocks. And he said, if you want to play basketball, you got to make your own goal. So you got to go cut down a tree. And how big a tree? And he told me, and I was like, oh my God, it was so hard. Couldn't get my breath and all that. And but I did it. Cut down a tree. And now you got to build a backboard, a wooden backboard. So I built that, and you got to fasten it this way, and you got to straighten out the nails that we pull out of the old lumber that he hauled from Houston, from a house that they tore down and hauled all the way up there to Arkansas, which now it's like 12 hours of driving, maybe more. You straighten the nails, and you get them really straight so they'll go in straight, and then hammer it in, cut it by hand. There was no power saw. Cut it by hand. Made my basketball goal. He went and got a rim, and I had to dig the hole. He helped me and put that goal up, and then I shot 500-600 times a day, different kinds of shots and patterns and everything. I was devoted. Loved that game. Still do like basketball, because you could do it by yourself. You don't have. I had 3 brothers, but they didn't have no interest. And I got in trouble for, and my brothers too, for climbing up on top of small trees and then bending them over so that you could jump, hang on to the top of that tree and jump like 15 feet in the air sometimes. Like wee, wee, but it makes the tree permanently bent over. And I can go on and on about me. But it was a mother who was saying, don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself, don't do that. Stop. Get out of
Where were you guys for the ER?
Oh, it's a solid hour.
Yeah.
40 minutes in a hurry. Remember, we were playing Blind Man's Bluff, and my brother was blindfolded, and we had a wall up that was framed, but it didn't have any plywood or nothing on it. And my brother went straight through the wall and fell off 10 feet, and she was sure he had a concussion. She was, oh my God, stay late, stay down, don't you go to sleep, and all that kind of stuff. And we drove all the way to Harrison, and he was just fine.
What was your first car? It was a Mustang, wasn't it?
My first car?
Yeah.
65 Mustang that I had to pay for. I had to earn it. I had to.
Childers is saying that theirs was a Camaro, a model Camaro.
Wow, that's pretty nice. My dad thought for sure that he had. He said, "Look, you got to pay for your own school clothes, your own dress clothes, going to, and then you can pay for your car." And I wanted to buy high heel shoes. Then my dad's like, "Oh no, you're not acting like some girl." High heel shoes. I had to buy my own suits and my own clothes to go to school, and then we can talk about having a car. And he figured with $600 I wouldn't be able to buy much of a car. Well, he was wrong. The car that I found was in a junkyard, had a bunch of stuff stacked all over the top and the back trunk and on the hood and everything. And he goes, oh, I saw that car, I just knew he wasn't going to be, I wouldn't have to worry about him driving at all, because it looked like a car that belonged in a junkyard. Aired the tires up, pulled all this stuff off, Justin on the carburetor, put a little bit of gas in, cranked up, ready to go. It was an undercover police car for Baytown Precinct 221. On the passenger side, I had a shotgun blast where they shot holes in the door and caved it in. They pulled it back out. A lot of Bondo on it. It had about 8 colors. So every time I washed it, the edges would show a different color. You know, so it was dark army green on the outside was the last color. So every time there was blue, there was yellow, there was a light yellow, there was a orange, there was a red, there was a whole bunch of colors. They kept, and everybody in Baytown Precinct, I met a policeman from that time period. Every time the people got to noticing the color of that car, they would change the color. So they just kept painting it. And anyway, I didn't get to drive it. I drove it one day towards the end of high school. I was in Texas by then. My dad, he tried to stay at home as much as he could, even though he made a lot of money as a union electrician. He would go to like Buffalo, New York, and take on all the hazard pay and blistering cold. He told me about, you know, putting bubble gum in holes in the front of the car to keep himself from freezing because the heat just couldn't keep up. And then to get out into the cold weather. You know, and he did all that, you know, renting a room from people that he knew or they got to know. And he saved all his money, and then when he would come back from 6 weeks being away. Now you got to understand, a mother was raising 3 boys beside me in a very rural area, very little money, and you know, you weren't wiring much back then. And so he would come back, and we could live on that for 6 months. He would think of different ways. We had a floor cleaning business, and they did really well, and they did that for quite a while. I mean, I learned to run a buffer when the handles were to the top of my head. I can swing a mop when it was taller than me. I could wax, big mops, and because I didn't want to sit all the time. We would do Montgomery Wards, and they would take us upstairs. You guys can be up on all these pieces of furniture, but you cannot be on the floor. She would like crawl from one. This is my chair. This is my bed. You know. Montgomery Wards and Sears, and but I didn't want to be that way. I wanted to do what the adults were doing, so I started swinging a mop and pushing a broom, and so we had a floor cleaning business that they had until they sold it. And then my dad, he tried to be a Harvest store salesman. He had his best friend and him. They tried to, and they did sell a little bit, but not enough to keep the families going, so they had to quit. And then they got into a number of other things. I think one of the things they were doing was selling butterfly collages inside of a box, so it'd be like a picture you hang on the wall with different kinds of butterflies, and they were trying to sell them to stores. Mom and Dad tried to get into making wicker baskets and things like that, thatch baskets, and we would all help as a family make these things that you were making things to sell to tourists as they came through the rural areas, the Scenic 7 they call it, and you know, paint rocks and do scenery. My mother was very artistic, very, very beautiful woman.
So are you.
And she was amazing to me. And she could just up and do things. And she would hug us a lot. But it was always like pretty tough. But you knew she cared, and she would hug, and you know, when she was scared, she would hug you till you thought you would lose your breath. You know, if you didn't, nobody want to sit next to Mom while Dad was driving, because she would pinch you instead of pinching Dad. You know, Bill, slow down. Sandy, I know how to drive. I've been driving all these years. You know, so Mom was always doing things for other people.
And volunteering, you guys.
As I got older, she saw us as a resource, and she also felt like we should
Get back.
be helping her help people. So we thought, well, we got the weekend off from school and everything, and not working, or she's, nope, you're going with me. We're going to go help. I remember one time, you're going to go help move. We're going to go down to Houston and help a family move. Then we lived in East Texas at the time, and drove all the way down into Houston. Didn't know these people. My mother went straight up to the lady and said, we're here to help you. We heard your house burned down. We want to help you move to the next place, whatever it is you will need us. My 4 boys are going to be here to help. Now, we are white people, and these were very, very black people. And in a black neighborhood, they were shocked and bamboozled what to do with, and we helped them move. She just load up the station wagon, and we'd pack it in. It's better when you're in this awkward position. Best thing to do is put your head down and go on to work. 16, 17, 18 years old, in a rough neighborhood, but we were there for the right reasons. So you got to understand, my mother didn't know these people. Somebody else that my mother knew these people. And she said, well, my boys and I will be there. And those people that recommended weren't there, but we were. And I can go on and on and on about that. My mother, there was a lady over here in Arkansas. She was depressed because her house was a mess. So my mom says, well, I'll call my boy. There was 2 of us at that time. And we went over and packed up stuff for this lady, and packed up stuff, and she's like, don't lose this, oh my God, she was fussing and depressed because of the place, but then when we were picking it up, she was having a hard time. So it's my mom being therapist, and you need to do what I tell you to right now. Okay, she don't want me to do it, just do what I tell you to do. Okay, so on and on. My mom, if a family needed help, they didn't ask her. She just was there. My mother, later on, Dad got into a little bit of money, and he spent money on her. He bought a 75 Cadillac, big Cadillac. My dad was proud of that. My mom would go to garage sales, even though she didn't have to at that point. And she would park down the street with that Cadillac so they wouldn't notice that she was in the Cadillac. Yeah, she didn't want anybody to, she wanted to be the modest person that she was. She didn't want, and she liked the car. For the longest time, I thought she didn't, because she acted embarrassed of it all the time. Oh dear, oh, that kind of thing. Well, it's the kind of car that Bill wanted. It's bright white, white interior, and big car, big. I don't think you can make much bigger than that car and still be legal. Beautiful car inside and out, and wonderful ride, comfortable. You were driving your couch down the highway, fantastic car. But my mother was always embarrassed, even though she liked it. She never ever wanted to. She would take the van that we had, a work van that I had patched up, and whenever she thought that she was going to go help somebody, she would take the station wagon or whatever other car, not the Cadillac, because she didn't want to have people thinking that she was something more. She wanted to be known as a modest person, and that was my mother all her life. Rarely ever spent money on herself. Always propping my dad up when he was having tough times. She was saying, get up, Bill, you can do this. Go on, we need you as a family. It was amazing to watch. And the love affair that my dad had, my dad would embarrass my mom singing love songs and to her in front of people. He didn't care. He just adored her. It's a wonderful thing to see as a child. And my mother would act all embarrassed and everything. Bill, stop. You're embarrassing me. That kind of thing. But she was always a wonderful, quiet, strong person. She would be lifting other women up when they were down and out, when their husbands were not treating them right. She was there. She would be doing what she felt was the right thing to do, always. And here I am as a child being raised by this woman who was, everybody's going to have their thing that they do in the house, and we're going to take turns, and you got to run the vacuum cleaner for 10 minutes. You're not going to do it in 1 or 2 minutes. You're going to spend a certain amount of time in each room, and you're going to do your fair share. You're going to wash dishes, and they're not going to be dirty. If I come in there and find out that they don't squeak when I run my hand over them, you're going to be doing them again. So she and I was in conflict. As I got into my teenage years, I was in conflict with her. I loved her, but she was trying to control my rowdiness to a minimum. And I was constantly getting in trouble with my dad and my mom. My mom said, "You wait till your dad gets home, because I can't deal with you right now." And I now know what that means. She was so mad, she's afraid she'd hurt me. And later on, she was like, pick up whatever she could find and start smacking me, because she was lost it. All the smart aleck things I would say, and just saucy things that it's nothing now. Kids do now. She was a wonderful, wonderful mother. Was there every minute while I was sick. She would sit down on the floor and fall asleep, or be right beside me. She was there all the time. Whenever my marriage was falling apart, she was there then too.
She was sick.
And she had cancer. And she wanted to be there more. She loved my boys. Just adored them. They allowed her. Now you gotta understand, my mother later on, when I was 19, she had a girl in her 40s.
And then another girl.
And they decided, well, we don't want to raise one by herself. They went and had another girl. Okay, so my dad was trying to explain it, because my mom said, "Don't tell him." He said, "You're just going to have to understand, Phil, you cannot treat your mom that way, because she doesn't feel good." I'm like, "What's wrong with her?" She just focused on me, because I was the biggest pushback guy of all her kids. I was like, "Well, I was like, "Dad, this is not fair." So, they went away for a week, 4 days or something. Come back with a kid. I'm like, nobody telling me that she's got a baby? My mom hid everything too. She would wear baggy clothes and,
You never told me that part, that she kept her pregnancy the whole time.
Yeah, she was amazing. And then when the second one came along, I told her that she needed to name that child, if it's a girl, Minnie Bridges. Anyway, she did put up with me while having little tiny girls. I'm telling you, that woman was a saint. If you want to give somebody that, I don't know. She was a wonderful human being. So when I finally moved out, she cried. I was like, "Why is she crying?" I was such a pain to her. Why is she crying? She cried and she cried. And Dad was holding her and saying, "Andy, come on now," And here I'm revving up on my car, rum, 67 Mustang now. And she just thought she would never see me again. She just cried and cried and cried. But when I left and I got over there, I was like, "Wow, this is great. I'm away from my parents. I can choose to do right or wrong. It's all up to me. All right. Nobody's there to tell me, And I'm doing concrete work. I loved the idea that I had a job. This is great. I had a job before, but this is a new job. And pouring concrete, that wasn't no big deal to me. It's hard work, that's part of it. That's what. Um, but in the middle of all that, I said, I told myself, I miss her. I'm going to call her up. Now, my mom was shocked by that. She's like, hello? Hi, Mom, this is Phil. Hi, Phil. Wasn't really an emotion or like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad to hear you. No, it wasn't. Are you okay? Is everything all right?
Yeah, that's gonna be your mom's first instinct. Is, oh my God, he's gone.
He's called me. He's got to be something wrong.
Yeah.
And no, I just wanted to see how you doing, and I wanted to talk to you for a bit. Really? Okay. What is it you need to talk about? I got to fix something. No, I'm just checking in. I want to talk with you, and I try to tease her, and I talk to her for 10 minutes or so. Just talking to her. Do you want to talk to your dad? No, I just want to talk to you. I'll talk to Dad another time. I just want to talk to you. And I just kept doing it. It took about a year, and she and I were, and I call her at least once a week, sometimes twice. And we were like best friends. I could not replace that friendship, that side of her that I got to see, the laughter and the humor that I got to rarely see when I lived with them. But I definitely got to see as I became older. Wonderful, wonderful sense of humor. So we became fantastic friends in my world. Maybe I was just her son in her world. She was scared to death I would die because I was riding a motorcycle when it wasn't popular in the 80s, and everything way I drove was dangerous, and she knew it. She was telling me, I got a life insurance policy on you. Don't you understand what you do to me? I'm thinking you're going to die. Went and got life insurance, and they didn't change anything. But I would call her and talk to her, and what a wonderful relationship that was for me, my benefit. So in that part of her, she was able to change who I was. I remember one time I called her from a pizza joint because everybody was there. I was like, I'm going to call my mom. They were like, oh, you're Mama's boy. And of course, I didn't care. So I called, and it was kind of noisy. And, oh, you at a party? Yeah, no, Mom, I'm at Gaddy's Pizza. Does Gaddy's have a daughter? No, Mom. It's a pizza place called Mr. Gaddy's. It was a chain. So my mom always was doing things for other people beyond herself. And that never changed. I could go on for hours talking about her. But she made me well equipped to appreciate and treat women properly. Between her and my grandmother, which my grandmother came to live with us whenever she was dying of breast cancer. And that's eventually what my mother's first experience with cancer was breast cancer, and then moved on to other things and eventually killed her. Took about 5 years. My dad struggled for all he was worth. I never saw such a broken-hearted guy. But to this day, my mother has people come up to me that are old, older. Well, now they're pretty much all gone. But they talk about how wonderful my mom was. That's not me, bringing that up. They just always want to tell me.
Even now, friends and stuff.
Right.
Will say that your mom was.
So how is it that you can? How better of a reputation can you get when everybody else spouts out about what good you did? So.
Tell them what your mom said about how you needed to live your life. We don't touch that.
She always said that you need to live your life like somebody's writing a book about you. She started writing a book. She wanted to do a book about the people she knew, but she was just going to make them animal characters and have similar circumstances where they fight with each other and they say these silly things, but they're all animal characters. That way she didn't have to feel guilty because they were people. But she always had an amusing feel once I got to know her about life and about people, amused by how people would act, men would act. She was see right through people that were shallow. She was very, very in tune with people that weren't any good. She would know. My dad didn't always listen, but she would know. And I'm guilty of that. So if I want a barometer, I get Christina, she'll tell me. And most of the time I try to listen, but I don't always.
Women crying.
Yeah, I don't do well with women cry. So, I could spend many, many hours talking about my mother and my experiences. Perhaps you'll hear me say things here and there. But a more wonderful person, I don't see how I could have had a better person in my life and still not be like a cartoon character made up. She did so many things for so many people unprompted. Took her kids and said, let's go, because I got to watch you guys. You're going to come with me. We're going to go help those people, How many people do you know like that? Not very many. And with
Especially
4 boys
now.
and 2 girls later on. Yeah, that's a big influence in my life. That's between her and her mom. Those 2 people were a massive influence in my life. Just fantastic for me. And between them and my dad, I tell people if I hadn't got all those spankings, I'd either be dead or in jail. I needed every one of them and more than I got. I deserved every one, even if it wasn't really me that did it. I deserved that and more than what I got. And like I say, if I hadn't had a father and mother that was spanking me or disciplining me, I probably would have been dead or in prison. Okay? So I have them. My dad is still alive. A fantastic guy. You got to remember, this guy that can sing a whole string of 50 songs, rock and roll and country, Sea Cruise and, all those 50 songs, he knew them by heart. Be driving down the road, singing songs. So I owe them. They don't owe me. I owe them. And I am very pleased to share with you guys. It is my privilege, maybe your torture, but it is my privilege to share and praise them now. And I'm glad it's being recorded because, I owe them far more than I could give in just an hour talk. I suggest that we all have our weaknesses and our problems, and we all can be better. But I think that the saying I try to say, I am just a turtle on a post. Really neat that I'm up on top of this post, but anybody with common sense knows that turtle didn't get there by himself. Somebody helped him get on top of that post. And my mom, my dad, and so many other people are responsible for anything redeeming about me. They helped me become a turtle on a post. So I owe my grandmother and so many other people along the way for the things that they taught me. And yes, I did have decisions to make, good or bad, but I was given that opportunity to be a turtle on a post, and I'm humbled by it all the time. My grandmother's saying was, "It doesn't matter what happens to you. It's how you react to it that actually matters. How you react to it, Phil. Not what happens to you, but how you react to it." Sometime I have to talk about my grandmother. What a wonderful parent group that I had. And the people they surrounded themselves with were fantastic people. Fantastic people. To this day, I admire these people. The Elmores, and on and on and on. There's wonderful people. And they were the ones who were around my mom and dad and loved them. Well, it tells you what kind of people they were. So, yes, I was very fortunate to be raised by these people, by this woman, Sandra Bridges, who's been gone for 20-something years. I thank you guys for putting up with me.